There is a museum in Boston that displays 13 empty frames. They hang on the walls exactly where the paintings used to be, gilded wood surrounding nothing. One held the only seascape Rembrandt ever painted. Another held one of just 34 known works by Vermeer. Together, the missing pieces are worth over $500 million. The museum will pay you $10 million if you bring them back. In 35 years, no one ever has. Every story in here actually happened. That's the part that should scare you. This is the Unlit Room. New stories every day, Monday through Saturday. Tonight, the largest art theft in history and the one detail that suggests the paintings may be gone forever. The Isabella Gardner Museum sits on the Fenway in Boston, a 4-story Venetian-style palazzo that Isabella Gardner built in 1903 to house her personal art collection. Under the terms of her will, the collection can never be altered. Every painting, every sculpture, every piece of furniture must remain exactly where she placed it. If anything is changed, the entire collection is to be sold and the proceeds given to Harvard. That clause is the reason the frames are still empty. March 18, 1990. St. Patrick's Day weekend in Boston. The streets are quiet. The parade was earlier that day, and by 1 in the morning, most of the city is asleep. At 1:18 a.m., a buzzer sounds on the security desk inside the Gardner Museum. The night guard, Rick Abath, 23 years old, making barely above minimum wage, glances at the intercom. Someone is at the side entrance. 6 minutes later, at 1:24, 2 men in Boston police uniforms buzz the door. Abath lets them in. One of the officers tells him they're responding to a disturbance call. Abath doesn't question it. He doesn't press the panic button mounted beneath the desk. He leads them inside. The officer looks at Abath and says 5 words. "Gentlemen, this is a robbery." They handcuff Abath and the other guard on duty. They wrap duct tape around both men's heads, covering their eyes. They carry the guards to the basement and secure them to pipes. Neither guard will be found for hours, and then the 2 men go to work. It's worth pausing on the security. The Gardner Museum had no internal cameras. None. An independent security review in 1988 had recommended upgrades. Better locks, surveillance systems, a direct line to police. The board rejected every recommendation. The reason was cost. So 2 men in rented police uniforms had the entire museum to themselves. And what they did with their 81 minutes inside would baffle investigators for decades. They moved systematically. The Dutch room first, the museum's crown jewel, where the most valuable works hung. They lifted Vermeer's The Concert off the wall, one of only 34 paintings by Vermeer known to exist, worth an estimated $200 million on its own. They took Rembrandt's The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, his only known seascape. They cut the canvas out of the frame with a blade, leaving the stretcher bars behind. They moved to the short gallery. They took 5 sketches by Degas, a painting by Govert Flinck, a Manet, and then they did something no one has ever adequately explained. They took a bronze eagle finial from the top of a flagpole, a decorative ornament worth almost nothing. They took a Chinese gu vessel, an ancient bronze cup with no significant resale value, and they walked past a Titian, one of the most valuable paintings in the building, without touching it. 13 works in total, 81 minutes, and a selection so strange that it suggested one of 2 things. Either the thieves were following a list they didn't fully understand, or they had a purpose that had nothing to do with selling the art. At 8:15 the next morning, the day shift arrived to find the museum's front door unlocked, the security desk empty, and the motion detectors recording 2 sets of movement that had wandered through the building for over an hour. The guards were found in the basement, alive but shaken. The frames were already empty. The FBI launched the largest art crime investigation in American history. They had motion sensor data, guard testimony, and a partial vehicle description. What they didn't have, and still don't, is a single fingerprint, a single frame of footage, or a single recovered painting. But they had a theory, and it led to a man who was already dead. The FBI's primary theory centers on Boston's organized crime network. In 1990, Boston's underworld was fracturing. Rival factions of the Italian-American mafia were fighting for territory, and relationships between mobsters and law enforcement had become dangerously entangled. One name kept surfacing: Bobby Donati. A soldier in the Boston Mafia, Donati was known for two things: loyalty to his boss, Vincent Ferrara, and an unusual interest in art. Donati had connections to several known fences who dealt in stolen artwork. He had the contacts, the motive, and the kind of reckless ambition that could explain the puzzling selection of pieces. The FBI's theory goes like this: Donati organized the heist not to sell the paintings, but to use them as leverage. Ferrara was facing federal racketeering charges. If Donati could offer law enforcement something spectacular, the return of $500 million in stolen art, he might negotiate his boss's freedom. It would explain the strange choices: the Eagle finial, the GU vessel, the ignored Titian. If the goal was never to sell the art, the market value didn't matter. What mattered was volume, enough pieces to make the bargaining chip impossible to ignore. But not everyone who has studied this case agrees with the FBI. Some investigators believe the heist was a commissioned theft, that a private collector, possibly overseas, ordered specific pieces, and the thieves simply followed a shopping list they'd been given. The strange selections under this theory aren't strange at all. They're someone else's taste. Others point to the Irish-American mob connection. Whitey Bulger's organization controlled much of Boston's criminal underworld in 1990, and several informants over the years have claimed the paintings passed through hands connected to Bulger's network before disappearing. The FBI has publicly stood by the Donati theory, but 3 decades of investigation have produced no paintings, no definitive proof, and no arrests. All 3 theories account for the known evidence. None of them have led to a gallery wall. There is one detail that cuts through the speculation. It doesn't confirm who took the paintings, but it might explain why they never came back. 1 year after the robbery, Bobby Donati was found dead. His body was in the trunk of his car, parked on a residential street in the Boston suburb of Vermeer. He had been stabbed repeatedly. The murder has never been solved. If Donati organized the heist, if the paintings were his bargaining chip, the plan failed. Vincent Ferrara stayed in prison. The deal was never made, and whatever Donati knew about where 13 masterpieces were hidden, he took with him. The paintings didn't vanish because no one could find them. They may have vanished because the only person who knew where they were was silenced before he could make the trade, and so the frames hang empty, not as decoration, not as a statement. Under Isabella Gardner's will, nothing in the museum can be moved. The frames stay on the walls, exactly where the paintings were, as placeholders for a return that has never come. The Gardner Museum still offers $10 million for information leading to the recovery of the paintings. It is the largest reward ever posted by a private institution. Tips come in every year, hundreds of them. None have panned out. There's something about those empty frames that stays with you. They're not memorials, they're not art, they're open questions mounted on a wall waiting for an answer that may no longer exist. Somewhere, Vermeer's The Concert is in a room. Rembrandt's only seascape is leaning against something. 35 years of silence and 13 frames that are still keeping their places just in case. If this one kept you up tonight, good. New stories every day, Monday through Saturday. Subscribe so the next one finds you too. Follow the Unlit Room wherever you listen. Tell a friend who can't sleep. Full story on the main channel. Follow if you're wide awake. That was the Unlit Room. See you in the dark.